In the first hour, guys, talked with Myron Metcalf about Dalvin Cook and what his ceiling is. I'm working on an article about it right now. And if you take his rate statistics rather than his totals from last year, we do this a lot with baseball and things like that. His most comparable running backs in yards per carry, yards after contact, and yards per touch, that includes passing too. He compares favorably to Ezekiel Elliott, Mark Ingram, and Joe Mixon really closely in those numbers. Is that not only the expectation for Dalvin Cook, but a requirement for the Minnesota Vikings offense to be actually good this year?
His comps don't surprise me one bit. And the second part of your question, the answer is absolutely yes. Yeah, this is all. I think if you were to pick out the most important things, knowing what we know about the capabilities of the players in this offensive scheme, all right? Knowing what we know about their talents, about what they can and can't do, knowing what we know about if too much is asked of certain people, what will happen. I think that Dalvin Cook is one of easily, probably, let's say, the top two people. Because you know what you can get and will get from Diggs and Thielen, but all of those guys are at the mercy of Cousins. Dalvin Cook is to a certain degree, but not quite as much. So I'm not surprised by the comps. I think Dalvin Cook can be a fantastic football player, and his success is paramount to if this team is going to get back to the playoffs after last season.
I don't think the question is if he's as talented or as gifted as any of those guys or as good a football player as any of those guys. Can he stay healthy? Because, yeah, if he can play 14 games relatively healthy, as close to 100% as a football player can be over the course of a schedule, yeah, I think he can put up those kinds of numbers, and that would be tremendous if he could for the Minnesota Vikings. Nothing props up a quarterback better than a running game, and especially in Gary Kubiak's offense, we've been hearing about how much he loves to use play action. For play action to be effective, you need your running game to be effective, not to mention the weapon he could be throwing the football to him out of the backfield. I think he could be as good, if not better, than any of those guys that you just mentioned, Coller. It's just a matter of whether or not he can stay healthy for the bulk of an NFL schedule. That's the major question, is it not?
And they must think that because they did nothing to put anything around him aside from draft Alexander Madison in the third round, which is just, you're flipping a coin at that point to whether the guy can actually play or not. And that one was a little bit surprising just because he wasn't a guy that people felt like needed to be picked in the third round, that his draft stock was more of a fourth or fifth, but they made sure that they got him in the third. But aside from him, they talked about him as filling a Latavius Murray type role as a bigger running back. Okay, I mean, I don't really know exactly what that means. Latavius Murray's role was mostly go in when Dalvin is hurt and be good. And that's exactly what Latavius Murray was paid for, and he did well. Now they really don't have anyone behind him. But my question for you guys is, with Dalvin Cook, would you be concerned about giving him the ball 300 times?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, that's the question.
Can I tell you why I wouldn't?
Oh, okay. And my question back to you off of the point that you're about to make too, Coller, is this. What is the proper use of what is the measured, we think this guy's good, but to Ramie's point, we can't get him hurt. What's the proper use of Dalvin Cook?
I'm going to go 300 carries and 75 catches, I think, is the proper use for Dalvin Cook. I think he's in on every damn play, and I think you give it to him every play.
What is he
doing? I will tell you why. Because I don't care if he has a long career.
I know.
I'm sorry. I like you, okay, Dalvin Cook. You seem like a great guy. But I don't care if you have a long career. It usually doesn't work for running backs to have a long career running 300 times and catching the ball 75 times.
Yeah,
but it just doesn't matter.
If he's on pace for those types of numbers, I don't think he makes it to those types of numbers. I think you're without Dalvin Cook 8 games into the season in all likelihood.
So when it comes to predicting his injuries, here's why I think that it's hard to say that he just can't stay healthy. An ACL tear is something that can happen to anybody. I mean, Adrian Peterson is one of the healthiest running backs in the league, getting 300 carries, and then he gets an ACL tear because stuff happens. Klay Thompson, one of the most healthy players for years and years in the NBA, tears his ACL last night because he falls weird. The hamstring injury is probably because of the ACL recovery. So those things are both resolved. And even with that said, if you're only telling me I get 8, 9, 10 games out of him, but I'm giving him the ball at that sort of pace, I'm still going to take it anyway, because the Minnesota Vikings are in a position to play like there's no tomorrow. It's kind of like how in the playoffs and the World Series, when the Seattle Mariners did this in the playoffs. The Arizona Diamondbacks did this too. They brought in Randy Johnson as a reliever because they were like, bleep it. Who cares about Randy's future? We have to bring him in as a reliever because that's what we have to do because there's no tomorrow. That's the way the Vikings have to approach the season.
But if I get Dalvin Cook hurt late in the season or in the playoffs, I really don't care. I think if you go with your plan, though, starting with week 1, which I love the idea of saying we don't care. Because there are certain positions in sports where, you know what? You burn the guy up. I don't give a damn.
I love the
If it
idea of
gets you-
shortening this guy's career.
I
Just
do.
love it. Just mwah.
When it comes to this position, it is the coup
You could have
d'etat.
played receiver, Delvin.
It is a great idea, but I don't know. I'm with Ramie on this. I don't know how far you can get him down this road, and then so the question then that comes back to me is this: okay, let's say 8 weeks in, he's like, oh boy, I'm hurt. Where do you turn, the kid?
I think you have to go with a combination of just role players, how they fit best with their skill sets.
You call
Madison is more
Marshawn
of a
Lynch at that
bruiser.
point?
Yeah,
what
maybe.
do you do?
No, I think that that you probably end up playing a little bit of Mike Boone, a little bit of Alexander Madison. Amir Abdullah is a veteran, very smart guy. You bring him in. Maybe Rock Thomas shows something. I actually liked what I saw from Rock Thomas last year. He's a more instinctual runner. And maybe you get something nice out of those guys that you're surprised by. But the way I look at it is you can't approach the season going, but what if he gets worn down? Or what if the hammy comes back? Or what if there's an injury? Or what if? You have to win these games. You have to go all in with him. It's like a pitcher where your bullpen is awful, but you get to the 95th pitch. You're like, oh, well, he's got 95 pitches, so got to take this guy out. But if you're in the win now mode, it's kind of like that Johan game where they left him in to pitch the no-hitter. That's kind of how the Vikings are right now, though.
It was one of the stupidest, most
and it ruined
counterproductive
his
things
career.
ever.
I know. But if that had been a playoff game or something, I would have said when they did it, it was like June. So why did you do that to Johan? But I mean, if it was a playoff game and your pitcher is just killing it and you don't trust your bullpen at all, and it's a 1-0 game, and you know what? You risk him being hurt for the rest of the playoffs. You risk him potentially having a shorter career. You just let him go and throw 120 pitches because there's no tomorrow. And that's the way I look at this entire season. If you play it out as if, oh, well, we don't know if Dalvin is going to pull the hammy again. He could pull the hammy running 10 times a game like he did last year.
I would feel very comfortable going with the scenario that you just painted, except for the fact that if he goes down, I have no idea if it's going to work. Like this committee idea.
The cupboard is bare behind Dalvin Cook.
This goes for any position.
I look at it as workload control. I'll use a different analogy than the one you used, which is Kawhi Leonard sat out 22 games this year, not for an injury, just because they wanted to control his workload.
Are you in a position that
they wanted
him,
they wanted
Vikings,
him to be fresh for the postseason?
But the Raptors were great.
I think you have other moves. You have other players. You have other weapons on the offense that you don't need to put a heavy workload on Dalvin Cook. Not early in the season. I think running games become more important later in the season. When you get into December and get into the playoffs is when you really need a running game. But I would control his workload as much as I could. I wouldn't shy away from him. I'm not saying I'd handle him with kid gloves by any means, but I wouldn't give him the type of load that you're talking about because I don't think he would survive it.
See, when you say, oh, we've got these other weapons, I mean, they've really got, aside from Irv Smith, which I don't know what I have here, you have the same exact weapons as you did last year. And by week, what was it? Would you say, Judd, 5 or 6? Everyone's double teaming Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs every single third down and making life difficult for Kirk Cousins. I think to succeed with this offense that they're going to run, you have to have your all-around running back dominating. And Ezekiel Elliott is a good example of this, where Ezekiel Elliott might have his career shortened. He's had a couple of injuries along the way too, but the Dallas Cowboys have a good enough defense to win, and they have a good enough quarterback right now in a rookie contract to win. So you give him the ball 300 times and you throw to him 77. I'm saying that his previous injuries, Dalvin's, do not suggest that there's a guarantee if you hand him the ball 300 times. What is he going to tear his ACL again? I don't know. A lot of guys come back and are just fine for years and years with the ACL injury. The hamstring, if it relates to the ACL, and that's fine. I mean, I don't know. Anybody can pull a hamstring at any time. I wouldn't dial back Stephon Diggs because he's had groin injuries in the past. I'm going to run Stephon Diggs 100% of plays or 90% of plays because he's Stephon Diggs and we need to win. Tell me which ones of these games are just going to be like, oh, we could just mix in anybody on any play. We could just throw in the rookie third rounder. Like Atlanta, that's not an easy game. Chicago, Green Bay,
Where it's gonna
where are
bite.
these easy games?
Well, the thing that's going to come back to bite this team in the ass for sure, and we knew this was we could play a game starting now, and we could play it again in a month and a month from there, which is what cost the Vikings by being so tied up by the salary cap.
It could definitely be that, right? Because you
Latavius
can't
Murray,
sign like a TJ Yeldon.
and
or something.
Latavius Murray is a big loss.
Yep,
that's a big loss because where I run into a conundrum here, Matthew, is I see your point perfectly, but then you throw out these scenarios of, well, who can play behind Dalvin Cook? And I think to myself, okay, that doesn't excite me either. At least when Latavius came in, you were going to get a really quality veteran guy who knew exactly, because that position now takes a lot of smarts too.
Todd Gurley can't be a workhorse back. You want Dalvin Cook to be a workhorse back?
They went to the Super Bowl and had a number one offense with him as a workhorse back.
And his career might be done, but they got to the Super Bowl, and if they had won it, so I don't care about him personally at all. I care about the action. I don't. I mean, guys,
I get it. I get it.
Guys get worn down.
Todd Gurley is a great example for my argument. I mean, if the Vikings,
he seems like a nice guy. I just can't be concerned about that.
If they have a top offense because they ran Dalvin Cook into the ground and he ends up with 1,400 yards and 70 catches, then you got everything you asked for.
But this is where not having any substantial cap room with which to operate is going to bite them at some point.
Yeah, I just think
it doesn't just, now that Kyle's restructured, it doesn't just go away.
I just think when it comes to any player on this team, that even if there are injury histories with certain guys, I mean, Kyle Rudolph had an injury history at one time, and then for the last 3 years, he's played all 16 games. At one time, we were saying, Kyle Rudolph, he'd be good if he wasn't beat up all the time or dinged up. You couldn't, for those 3 seasons, play Kyle Rudolph half the snaps and let Michael Pruitt play the rest of them, right? You have to just go all in with Kyle Rudolph. And
so you're saying
Diggs.
Just do this, and worst case, he gets hurt. But if you don't play him more, you're screwed then too.
That's right. I think if you try to play this scared, what you're doing is leaving a lot of success, big runs, yards on the table, because no one is close to Dalvin Cook on this team. And if he gets hurt, then, well, he gets hurt. Then, I mean, what are you going to do? It's just hard to predict it.
You don't think they can win or even put themselves in playoff position without a heavy workload for Dalvin Cook?
No, I don't. I really don't think that they can be a playoff team without a great year from Dalvin Cook.